welcome back to another amazing episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks with me, your host, Dr. Lisa L. Campbell, the Growth Motivator. And today, my guest is Deborah Fletcher, author of Finding Your Hey. I have to tell you, when I first got the book, I was like, hey. So, welcome to the show, Deborah.
Thank you for having me. I love the way you say it.
It's so cool. I mean, and when you think about it, so many of us need to find our hey and find it with happiness, right? Because there's so much out there for us to experience. And when we get stuck, it's sometimes it's just bad.
Exactly. Yes, that's true.
So tell our listening, viewing audience a little bit about your background, and then we'll talk about the book. We don't want to tell them too much about the book. We want them to have their own copy in their hands.
Thank you. Well, let's see. I'm not going to tell you my life story. That would be boring. But I will give you some background. I decided to write the book when I had a number of people actually say, hey, you know what? You should write a book. The reason why they said that is that I'm a storyteller by nature. In my professional life, what I was doing was leadership development, teaching managers and leaders skills like emotional intelligence, ways to inspire the people that they work with, and encourage their employees or their direct reports to be the most productive, the most engaged workers that they could be. So that's my background. And the way that I wrote the book is almost like a training program. I call it a crash course in braving grief and embracing joy. And so the book is structured somewhat in that way.
I love it. I love it. We all need that book that helps us get to the next level, but recognize that there's nothing wrong with us, right? That we're human and life happens. It's all about, recovering and moving forward. So I have to ask you this question, just for the purposes of our listening, viewing audience. So what happened in 1999?
Well, in 1999, I gave birth to two little girls. And it was a surprise because, well, I found out at the first ultrasound that I was having twins. But when I first became pregnant, I was convinced that there was a little boy in there. So I kept, referring to him as Billy Bob, and I would talk to him. And so I've told my daughters this, and I said, you must have been wondering, where is this little guy? You would have been there looking around, and who is she talking to?
Interesting, interesting. And so, since we're talking about the babies who are not babies anymore, right?
Yeah.
Tell our listening, viewing audience a little bit about that birth, and you're going to be surprised once you tell your story, because you know how I say you're never alone. There's always someone that has gone through what you've gone through. So tell us about your identical twins.
Exactly. We were expecting to have two little twin girls that, we wouldn't be able to tell apart. And we imagined chasing them around and having, just that perfect family life. Of course, you envision this perfect family life, And unfortunately, they came early. So they were born at 30 weeks. And the second born, my daughter Quinn, had a difficult birth herself. And in the end, she has been diagnosed with a number of disabilities. So we first found out that she had cysts on her brain when she was 3 weeks old. They typically do an ultrasound on premature babies' brains up where I live. So that's when they said, we see some scarring. We see some areas on her brain which which have been impacted by some sort of deprivation of oxygen, something like that. And this will result in probably her being uh, physically or in motor impairment wise, she would be impacted. And they were 3 weeks old. So of course we were devastated. And as I say, I pictured her, maybe walking with a limp or having some other sort of problem with dexterity. And in fact, what resulted was, in fact, she's severely disabled and she has multiple disabilities. So that's something that came as an absolute shock to us, naturally.
Oh, absolutely. You know what? I don't think that people really understand how much of an impact that has on you. So in 1992, I gave birth to a little girl, Jasmine, and I was 34 weeks gestation. I was losing fluid from around the placenta, so the doctor wanted to do a C-section. And I was 1 month away from my 19th birthday when I had her. I had finished high school. My mom was the one that was like, "You're pregnant." I was like, "Oh, okay. I only had sex one time, but I guess it only takes one time to make a baby."
Yes, it's a miracle.
It is. And so when she was born, there was a CT scan done that suggested that she had some intracranial bleeding. And we stayed in the hospital for 7 days, right? That's like unheard of today. And I brought her home thinking that all was well. And 3 years later, after my mom saying something's wrong with Jasmine, she's not progressing, like kids should. She should be walking, right? She had turned 1. She should be walking. She should be doing more. I took her to a physician, neighborhood physician, who said, well, not all kids progress at the same time. So I said, okay. And then, the life just kept moving forward until one day I decided that I owed it to her and to myself to figure out what was actually going on. And so here we are. I was 21, I think, at the time, and a single parent with no support from her father whatsoever. And I get the news of A, she wasn't going to walk. B, she couldn't hear. C, she had, multiple intellectual disabilities. And at that point, I literally lost my voice because I was still trying to figure out who Lisa was.
Right.
And so
Yes.
no
Oh, you were
one,
so young.
yes, I was very young, and no one understands that life. Not that it's just you and I, but I'm saying we understand how that time period in our life felt.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because, you know, I don't want to sound ableist because it's not that I thought, oh no, it's horrible. She's disabled. It's more, we want our children to be happy. We believe that that is based on perfect health and perfect circumstances, and that doesn't always happen. And as you would know too, the impact on your own life is quite substantial. And that at that time it was, yeah, I mean, it's just pure grief. And it's grief for your daughter mostly, but also partly for you too, for yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. I tell people all the time, having her literally helped me find my voice because I realized that I had to advocate for her. And honestly, my husband and I joke about this all the time. Jasmine has the best life ever.
Yes.
Okay, because number one, Jasmine did start walking at the age of 7, so she walks. She doesn't talk, she can't hear, even though we our running joke is she can hear what we're saying. But when you look at her, she has no care in the world.
Yeah.
Like we brought her home during the pandemic and for 6 months from where she lives. And Jasmine was just enjoying life without a clue. And so to some extent, I'm kind of jealous of her not knowing what's happening in the world and having all of her needs met each and every day without fail. There's something to say about the life that she's living.
I agree. It's a wonderful way to live. And my daughter Quinn, her twin sister Emma, she says all the time, she says, I wish someone would get me up in the morning, dress me, feed me, and take me to work. And so
We take those things for granted, don't we?
we do. And that's the beautiful thing, is that all of this joy comes when you finally realize that this is a gift, and as is every challenge in life, and that you can still move through the pain, because of course, not to minimize it, of course there's pain, but there's so much joy on the other side. So that's so funny. You and I have the same experience.
Yes, and that's the one thing. When I set out to do 52 authors, 52 weeks, I did not expect that I was going to continue healing as a result of this journey, because I do not have any, and as you know, right, we logged on 2 to 3 minutes before we recorded this episode. I said hi, you said hi. I wanted to make sure that pronounced your name right. I know things about you, from the book, but we don't know each other.
Right.
And I just love the connections that I'm making. And I know that this work is helping others. And so I'm so honored that, number one, you were bold enough to tell your story, because it would be selfish not to tell your story, right? It would be selfish, because you're on the other side of it, and others need to hear, as you say, how you found, right, joy
Yeah.
and experiencing happiness in spite of what you have experienced, and honestly what you will experience, because as my grandmother and them used to say, just keep living.
Well, that's exactly it. And that is it in a nutshell. Honestly, this is life. Good things, wonderful things happen, and there's going to be some tough times too. It really is just living, right? That's all it is. And it's almost like once I recognized that aspect as well, it just allowed me to be more open and receptive to noticing all of the wonderful things that were happening and grabbing onto those happy moments and being able to laugh at those moments which were not so great. And I think it's a really important life skill. And what's happened is that I use that life skill in every aspect of my life. Anything can be turned into a funny story. And what I've noticed is that my daughter Emma, so they were identical twins, and she was born first, and she was smaller, so she just had a very easy birth, and so she is completely able-bodied and everything else. But she uses this concept of addressing a hardship and working through it, knowing that it's not the end of the world. Now, she would say that the end of Harry Styles' world tour was the end of the world, but that's just something that she's got to work through still. But she has this ability to look at a hardship and either in the moment or after the fact, turn it into a story. And that, I just think, that's something that I've passed on to her. And what I hope from the book is that all of the strategies that I talk about and all of the stories, because it's not just my story that I talk about, but those other stories And the strategies that came out of all of my friends' experiences with grief or hardship will resonate with other people. And they'll say, oh, I see myself either in that story or in that, potential to use that tactic or strategy in order to get through this life.
I love it. And one of the first things that I saw in the book, every time I get my new book, I always look at the table of contents. I like to see how many chapters people have in their books because when I was writing my book, I had 10 chapters and my publisher was like, write two more. And I'm like, no, I don't want to write two more. I'm done good with the 10. But the last two chapters were really powerful. And so I'm always intrigued by the format and the minds of others. And what I really, really liked was how you divided your book into sections and how you called section 2 the guest lectures. And having um, taught in the university level since 1997, I was like, oh, lectures, what's that about? I like how you framed it because it's literally from start to finish. You called it a crash course, but I almost felt like it was a conversation that you were having with us, where you were sharing and allowing others to share, which really helps us understand again, you are not alone in your journey. We all have some type of journey. They're just different, but they're still journeys that cause us to struggle, to be disappointed, to grieve. And so I'm glad that you wrote something to help others because in turn, I'm sure it kind of helped peel some layers from you that you didn't realize you were holding on to.
Oh, exactly. I mean, writing the book was somewhat selfish in a way because I knew that it would be cathartic for me as well. I knew that. I knew that for me to put it all, write it all down, it helped me to gain even more perspective, which I think that's another way of coping with whatever comes your way is to gain that perspective and look at what is happening in this moment, is not going to last, whether it's happy or sad. It's just a moment in time.
Yes. It won't always be like this, right?
That's right.
Yes. So let's shift gears just a tad bit and talk about tools that we need to navigate all of these. I call them lessons, right? If you don't learn the lesson will learn you. But in the book, you talk about these tools that we need to help shift our focus, our purpose, our mindset. So, what are some of the tools that you feel have helped you the most outside of humor?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest one for me is being able to put a story in perspective by using that humor. And the other lesson that I learned from my father, the first being humor, the other lesson that I learned from him was that the attitude that you have regarding what happens to you is in fact a choice. And that recognition was huge for me. And that reference to finding your hay, that is describing exactly what he did when he went through his own experience of grief, which was came as a result of having a stroke and a heart attack at age 46. And it was devastating for him because he was never able to work in the career that he had. And his life was completely changed.
Mm.
And for a 46-year-old man, it's tough, right? He was at the prime of his career, and so he could never work again. And he knew that he had to go through a lot to become, or at least to feel normal again, because he completely lost his speech So he had to learn how to talk again. He was in speech therapy for 2 years. But what I saw every single day was him making that choice to get up, you know, shower, get dressed, shave, and face the day with a positive attitude. And that's not to say that he just glossed over anything bad. It's just that he made the choice to look at things from a different perspective. And that really was an inspiration to me. And that's what I hope to pass on.
Wow. So, okay, Deborah, I have to tell you this also. This is why this is my show, but I love the show because I feel like we are helping others. Okay, so my dad, after working at his job for 49 years, he wasn't, 46 years old, but he had been working on the same job for 49 years, and we were able to keep up with his tenure because he started when I was born. And so 49 years into his job, which he absolutely loved, he had a stroke.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
we believe he had multiple strokes. The last one was the one where it set him down, so to speak.
Right.
And so one of the things that I watched him experience was, number one, thinking that he was going to go back to work. And I was like, yeah, no, I think you're done, right? Hey, you're done.
Yeah.
Um, but watch him really struggle with navigating his new normal in life, which was, okay, you worked 49 years plus. Now is the time to, kind of enjoy life and go out in your garden and do all the things. And I feel like slowly he's getting there. But I really want to call him up and say, hey, Dad, you know, there's so much more that this world wants to show you because he hasn't quite turned the corner yet. I
Mhm.
think he's still grieving, and someone said, "That's not a loss." Yes, it is.
It
He's
is.
still
Absolutely.
grieving with the loss of that job because he loved that job and he was going to work that job until he died. But I also think that he's grieving some of the independence that he once had. Now, he didn't have any lot of deficits from his stroke. He did have, the weakness, and he went to therapy. But I think that his whole life, and this is a lesson in this, his whole life was just working and coming home and listening to his music. And he hasn't quite figured out how to replace that part of his life with something else. But, every day, every week, we try to work with him on, hey, okay, let's come out the house. I have to say, like, let's say there's a family event. Instead of saying, are you going to the family event? I have to say, on Sunday, I will pick you up at 3 o'clock for the family event. Because if I don't
Right.
do that, he won't go.
Right.
And my desire for him is that he can change his focus and his perspective because his dad, my grandfather, currently is 104 years old.
Oh,
And so I'm like, you genetically, you have a lot of life ahead of you, but you have to change. You got to change your mindset about where you are today and what the future can hold. But I realize that I have to be extra intentional with getting him to come out of the house, literally.
yes. Because once he's there, I'm sure he has a great time.
He does.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And you know what? I'm so mad at myself because beginning of May, my sister had her 48th birthday party. And so I'm looking for my dad because I heard he was coming. And so the party started at 3. I left at 6:30. No dad. So he lives 5 minutes from my house. I drove by his house. I saw him sitting in the car. I'm like, are you going to the party? No. I was so mad at myself because that morning I woke up, I should have said, hey, Dad, I'll pick you up at 3 o'clock for the party. So I think that we have to realize that we cannot isolate ourselves, right? And
Yes.
try to navigate life alone. But
Yeah.
having that community, whether it's family, non-family, you need it to help you continue to grow through the journey.
Yes, exactly. And you probably found this as well. In a sense, I have a new community, it's other parents who have kids like mine. And it's, meeting all of the health care workers and special teachers and everybody else. I would never have met all those people who are now my part of my community. And so, your dad will have to create or be introduced to community in a different way. And we all are, I don't know if we're doing it consciously, but we all need to derive meaning from our lives. And so I think that for those that tend to succumb to depression, um, it's in part a lack of meaning, maybe not the true, not the medical term depression, but for those of us that feel lost or alone, it's also a loss of meaning. And that's what your dad's experiencing as well, right? That in terms of the grief he's experiencing, he's lost that meaning that his life had. And it may not be something huge that he has to replace it with. I think for you and for me, the meaning that we sort of fell into was in the advocacy for our daughters. So that gave our lives meaning at that point. And even if, we couldn't change the outcome of their health, we could make sure that they were heard and seen and went to school and all of that. And that, that gave us that sense of being able to make a difference in that little way. So he'll find that. You may have to lead him to it, but
Will have to lead. I'm convinced that I will have to lead him,
yes.
because I don't think that internally, and I actually said to him right after the stroke, when I was captain of the ship, in terms of, the doctor's visits, and even, when he was admitted to the hospital, um, I realized at that point that he probably was depressed. And so at one of the doctor's visits, I asked for a referral to see a psychologist. And so I don't want to take away his independence. So I would say, like, well, Dad, did you make an appointment with the psychologist? And he's like, no. And so that's another thing that I'm like, Lisa, you needed to make the appointment. And I realized this, but I'm trying to navigate my life, his life. And so
Yeah.
I do like to check on him and make sure he's okay. And he does a very good job. And a lot of us do this. I call him up. Hey, Dad, how you doing? I'm great.
Right. Right.
But I realize it's okay to not be okay, but you have to be willing to get the help.
Yes.
You have to be willing, because help is available.
Yes. Yes. And there's, you know, so many people that are in the same circumstances as your dad, even fully healthy people that get to retirement age and think, oh, great, I'm now retired. And then they feel lost and life has no meaning. And it's, anybody can fall into that circumstance and that sense of not belonging anymore, that you don't have somewhere to go every day.
Yes, and you don't have, I think he doesn't feel like he has purpose, like he was defined by that job. And
Exactly.
we are so much more than what we do for income. So much more.
Right.
And I think he grew up in a time where, you work, you come home, you do it all over again, you retire, and then you travel. And just watching my parents, I made a decision thought 30 years ago that I was going to travel real time, because when you retire, who's to say that you're physically and mentally able to do it? And so life is supposed to be lived real time.
Right. Exactly. But your dad is from that generation where they didn't do that, right? And
Yeah.
the onus for that career defining them was really more on men at that time, obviously, as well. So he fell right into that.
He did. He did. Now,
Yeah.
now, in just thinking about humor, my grandfather is hilarious, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, did he just say that? But I didn't know, literally, like he's like, all like, my grandmother died like about 6 years ago, so he tells us all the time, all the ladies love me. I'm like, granddad, and it's still working. I'm like, what are you talking about still working? Don't tell me anything else about something working. I don't want to hear that from you. um, but our running joke is that we're gonna have some cousins that show up to his funeral that we don't know about. Because granddad, he claims the ladies just love him and they've loved him for years. So we'll see what happens.
That's
So
so funny.
hilarious. And he tells me all the time he is single, even though he says, your grandmother is still here in my heart and all of that. So yeah, he won't be getting married again, not on our watch. So I have to know, as we wrap up here, what's next? Like, hey, what's next?
Boy. I always thought in the back of my mind that I would love to speak about this topic and either in a sort of an inspirational way or even a corporate way, because my background is leadership development and teaching um, uh, that kind of corporate training arena. So at conferences and that kind of thing, I can see just applying what I've learned from so many people to either the business world or really it's all the same, no matter where at home, at work, all of these strategies and tactics can be used to get you through times when your expectations aren't met.
I love it. I love it. And there's definitely a place in corporate, because you know how they talk about, oh, we have the EAP, right? We have all these tools and resources,
Right.
but there's something really impactful about a 1 day workshop where someone can come in, and then beyond the 1 day workshop, like, one of the things I do is, after I do the workshop, I package in office hours, right, where that person can just reach out and we can just have conversations. I think that's needed, because today more than ever, people are struggling in so many different ways, and they're
Yes.
grieving in so many different ways. That we all just need to realize, hey, I think there needs to be a song about this. Um, listen, there are so many crazy songs out there. Um, and not crazy in a bad way, but just like, you're like, oh, that song with that word is famous. So I feel like you can have a song like, hey, we've made it another day. Hey, girl, you're beautiful, right? I feel like there's some things you can do, especially with you being a storyteller, right? Just put that in the back of your mind as
I love it. I love that.
so before we go, can you tell our listening viewing audience where they can find you, where they can get a copy of the book?
They can get a copy of the book on Amazon. I also have a nice big pile in my dining room, but
Me too. Me too.
I think every author does. You don't have to come to my home. You can order it online. So go ahead and place your order, as they say.
Yes. And where can they find you out in this virtual world?
I do hang out on Instagram.
That's where the older folks hang out, I believe. I mean, we're on TikTok too, but I think a lot of times Instagram, because it's easy, right? You can just post a picture or a photo. So when our show airs, we will have your Instagram handle scrolling across the bottom so they can grab that and follow you. I think today more than ever, we just really need to see and hear stories, words of motivation, inspiration, as well as humor, but then also finding joy and gratitude is as equally as important as well because as they say, life is lifing, but you can't
Mhm.
get to the other side. Hey, you were built for this.
I agree with all of that. That's perfect.
Well, do you have any final parting words for our listening viewing audience? Any words of inspiration, motivation, humor?
Well, I think you said it best. We're all in this together. You're not alone, and we all go through things that are not what we thought life would be. And there are lots of resources out there to help you gain perspective. And I think that that's something that once we realize, oh, I'm not supposed to just know how to do this and be good at this thing called life, that's the first step. And then being open to anybody else's little advice.
Yes, yes. Well, hey, we all my husband's probably gonna say, she says, hey, one more time. The funny thing is, you know how on the cell phone you can, I think if you type hey in the emoji thing, a little hand will pop up. So I
Right.
quite frequently will do that to folks. Just do my little hand like this. And that kind of opens the door for a conversation. How are you doing? Because sometimes we suffer in silence. And I
Yes.
know firsthand what happens when you suffer in silence. I know it firsthand. So I want others to know that there's so much out there for all of us. We just got to be willing and intentional to step out.
It's true.
Yes. Well, listen, everyone. This has been another amazing episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. I just finished chatting with Deborah Fletcher, author of Finding Your Hey. And I will see you all next week.